The first step is to realize that as far as the climate is concerned, it's really all about the CO2. When you read articles, you'll read about ice and methane and clouds and forest cover and methane, and you get all these long lists of things that affect temperature. If you look at the graph of global temperature versus CO2 over the last million years, the two of them track almost perfectly. And and the point is, if you don't reduce safe CO2, then it's game over. Everything else is a minor addition to that.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our host Tim Montague bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much. I'm kicking off the new year with one of my favorite topics, and that is climate restoration. This was a real light bulb for me in 2023 when I learned about the book Climate Restoration by Peter Fikowski, my guest today. What I learned is that we can actually get back to 300 ppm in a way that is affordable and permanent, and in ways that the energy transition are not solving. As an energy professional, you are doing good work out there, and we want you to keep doing that good work, okay? Fight that fight. Wind, solar, batteries, good. We need more of that. We want to get rid of the 50 gigatons of pollution that is the global economy, okay? That is net adding to the atmosphere. But we don't want to arrive at 2050 and have 450 ppm in the atmosphere. We're at 430 today. And it's very easily done that we could get to 2050 and be at 450. And that means climate chaos. So today we're going to talk about some ways that we can get back to 300 that are affordable, scalable, available, and permanent. So welcome back to the show, Peter Fikowski.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to see you again. Thanks for having me on.
I really appreciate the work you're doing. I talk to just about any thoughtful energy professional or prosumer who cares about the environment and the future of humanity. You know, the environmental movement is really not about saving the earth, Peter. It's about saving our butts. Let's be honest. The earth is going to be fine. But I'm curious, before we get into some of the nitty-gritties of climate restoration, what was the light bulb moment for you? Because you were a scientist and an entrepreneur before you were a climate restoration activist.
Yeah, the light bulb moment for me was From the very beginning of my career, I was doing hunger and poverty work, trying to make the world a better place while I was doing my high-tech semiconductor stuff. And the light went on when I realized that we were trying to save lives, but everyone ends up dying. That the key is we want to make life better. I said, oh, because everyone ends up dying eventually. So saving life means extending a life. I said, oh, if we're going to extend it, let's make it a life that we want people living. And that is what morphed me into just like, oh my God, if we're saving lives, but the world is a hothouse, is a mess, that's totally no good. So that's really changed my view right around 2000, 2010. And in 2010, I got serious about it and said, you know what? Let's get this let's make this happen.
And I love the premise of your book where you early in the book lay out, you created a filter that you wanted to analyze possible solutions to the trillion tons of carbon in the atmosphere, and they had to be permanent, scalable, affordable, and available today. It's a relatively simple filter. And then you ran all these different technologies through the filter and arrived at 4, which you talk about in the book. And then you've explained over the years that since you wrote the book in 2022, I mean, that's when it was published anyway, you've kind of whittled it down to 2 very viable technologies, which are ocean iron fertilization and accelerated methane oxidation, and both of which are very poorly understood by the general populace. And so if you want to go there, I'm happy to talk about those things, but you're also building a movement and bringing more people along, because you obviously have learned that it's not any good if you're just one person with this realization, right? You actually have to motivate many, many other people to have the same concern.
Yeah, I'm working on a new book with Carol, my co-author from the last one, and it's three paths to restoring the climate, and it's really very simple. The first part is deciding that we want to restore the climate. It sounds naive, like of course we want to restore the climate. Well, of course, it's not the same as deciding. And once we decide we want to give our children a safe climate, then we can go on and say, okay, good, let's pick a method. And that's the second thing, is pick a method. And as you said, the method has to be scalable, it has to be affordable, it has to be permanent, it has to be safe. If any one of those are missing, it's not going to happen. And it turns out that there's only one method, and that's the method that nature uses in the ice age cycle, which removes the same amount of CO2 that we want to remove, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then once you've picked that method, it's traditionally called ocean fertilization. We call it localized ocean fertilization. And then after you've decided you want to do it, then you implement it. And the nice thing is, since nature has done it, we can actually replicate what nature does. It's surprisingly easy compared to what you would think. And that's the whole thing. Decide, choose a method, and then implement it.
And it is a beautiful thing that iron is rich in the Earth's crust. And so whenever dust is blowing off the continents into the ocean, iron dust is blowing into the ocean, and it is a fertilizer for microorganisms that absorb CO2. And some of that sequestered CO2 then sinks to the bottom of the ocean and stays there for a very long time. Volcanoes also erupt and put this dust into the atmosphere. You talk about Mount Pinatubo in your book, which happened in the early 90s and which impacted, if I recall correctly, 0.1% of the ocean's surface, but had a dramatic impact on the atmosphere. It caused global CO2 levels to flatline for a couple of years. And so you see there that nature is doing this experiment all the time.
Yeah, well, Tim, let me say a little bit about this. So the implementation, which is photosynthesis in the ocean, and as I said, it's traditionally called ocean iron fertilization. And it's the reason that the most of the ocean is blue, which means there's nothing growing in it. What's missing for things to grow, as you said, is iron, just minute amounts of iron, and just like 1,000 times less than humans need, for example. But nature provides that iron just with dust storms, because how else is the iron going to get into the ocean than a dust storm or a volcano? And every once in a while, whales will pull iron-rich food off the deep ocean, and then they'll poop it out at the surface. That's the only way iron gets into the ocean. And what the localized ocean fertilization, which is really quite an advancement over what had been discussed for 35 years. It puts the iron in where it's needed in these downwelling eddies. The limit, if your readers, if your listeners look up ocean iron fertilization, they'll see a lot of negative material about it because the way it got written up in the literature and the scientific literature and the public literature is people imagine spreading it out over the whole ocean, which of course would change the ecosystem of the whole ocean irrevocably. And that's unacceptable, a non-starter. It turns out that the only place we did research using satellite CO2 data or CO2 data from satellites. And we discovered that the only place that CO2 is getting removed in the ocean is in these things that are called downwelling eddies. They're maybe 100 miles in diameter, maybe 200. And it's like an eddy in your bathtub or in your swimming pool. If it's spinning in a clockwise direction in the northern hemisphere, then it pushes the water down, just like in the air, a clockwise movement of the air, what do they call it, a high pressure system. It forms a high pressure system. It's called the Coriolis effect. If you remember from high school physics, and don't worry if you don't remember that. And so that downwelling eddy pulls the carbon down, pulls everything down. And what's very exciting about that is if you don't have that, when you fertilize the ocean, all of the biocarbon that's grown, all the phytoplankton and the zooplankton that eats it, gets eaten by fish. And the fish metabolize it and exhale it as CO2, and it goes back into the air. It's only when you can pull that carbon down before it gets metabolized that you actually reduce the CO2 levels. And that means that we only need less than 1% of the ocean area, which means that we know nothing bad is going to happen. But even if it did, the rich vegetation would get pulled into the deep ocean, where once it gets below about 3 kilometers or 2 miles, once it gets down below that point, pretty much everything dissolves because of the high pressure, and it's fine again. So what makes this new localized ocean fertilization very exciting is that it removes about 1,000 to 10,000 times more carbon than the ocean fertilization that you read about in the literature right now. So we're trying to get it published. The scientific community, as it should be, is reluctant because it's a stable boat, science, and they don't like disruption. But I expect we'll get that published this year or in 26.
So one of your initiatives is a 25-year plan to end global warming by 2050.
Yeah.
And this is a very worthy goal. It's, as you said in your opening, that if we're creating a future that is clean but not safe, what's the point, right? If it's going to be hotter than heck and all kinds of disruptions to life as we know it, much less food systems, for example, which will be a major impact to pretty much everyone on Earth. What's the point? So we have this technology, local ocean fertilization, and we know that it works because we've documented it in nature. It's a known phenomenon. We know that we only need to impact a small percentage of the ocean surface. We actually have products that are commercially available that you can distribute in the ocean. So what are the next steps, so to speak, and what is it that people can do who are listening to this to become part of this movement to decarbonize the atmosphere in a way that's timely and affordable?
Yeah, well, as I've been writing the new book, and looking at, because the last chapter has to be what can you do? So I've been thinking about this, and surprisingly, the main thing that people can do is become part of the message. And so we have a million sponsor campaign, and where we want to get a million people who are $1 a month, $10 a month, $1,000 a month, $1 million a month, whatever your realm is. I think there are probably more $1 a month people, but commit to uh, sponsoring climate restoration. That will send a message to the scientific community and the political community that people actually do want to restore a safe climate. Currently, when I go to Washington, when I go to the scientific meetings, people say, well, that's a nice idea, but if it were a good idea, the UN would be doing it already. And so the most important thing that listeners can do is go to the Foundation for Climate Restoration.org website. The short form for it is the number 4cr.org, and become a sponsor at whatever rate expresses your passion about giving your children a safe climate. Uh, once that happens, and more scientists get involved, more funders get involved, the amount of funding needed is about $1 billion a year. What's $1 billion a year? That's a penny per American per day. That's it, a penny a day. So ultimately, the funding is not going to be an issue. The big issue is that first step of deciding that we want to restore the climate and go beyond the status quo.
Yeah, so we're thinking about scratching the match head on
Yes.
on the pavement. It's that first motion to get the fire started that is the hardest part, and then there will be a chain reaction, and the numbers will tell the decision makers, the politicians, the scientists that, hey, people actually care about this, and you know, as you said, $1 billion a year. That's one of the crazy things that I was like mind blown for sure when you point this out in your book, that for $1 billion, worst case $2 billion a year, we could decarbonize the atmosphere. That is a very small amount of money in the greater scheme of things. Just for the United States, like the U.S. alone could fund that. One of our billionaires, we have dozens of billionaires, but just one of them could fund that without really feeling any pain or suffering.
Yes.
And I guess that's one of the things that really puzzles me, though, Peter, is why aren't more people of influence looking at this information and going, yeah, this makes sense. You know, Bill Gates is a good example, and I don't mean to pick on Bill, but he's in the news a lot promoting CDR. Direct air capture is his favorite form, seemingly. Building a machine that sucks CO2 out of the atmosphere. CO2 is in the atmosphere all around us, right, in very small quantities. It's a very potent heat-trapping gas, and it's very hard to grab it out of the air. It's very energetically expensive. It's doable, but it turns out that it takes 100,000 times more resources to do that compared to OIF. And so why does Bill Gates and his colleagues feel so strongly about direct air capture, for example?
Well, it's just status quo. That Bill Gates, he's not a scientist by training. He's an entrepreneur. Yeah, he went to Harvard same time I was at MIT, but he left to start his Microsoft.
Yep.
My point is that he relies on his advisors to tell him what to do in these sciences like climate. And I know a lot of his advisors, and they can't afford to risk their reputation and tell him, listen, you should buck the trend and actually go for restoring the climate. They can't afford that risk to tell him that. And so, since if he had a degree, it would be in computers, not in physics. I have a lot of sympathy for him. I told in the book I write about going to the Vatican and talking to Pope Francis and his office and talking to UN officials. Every one of them, to a person, everyone is wildly enthusiastic about restoring the climate.
Mm,
And to a person, from the Pope all the way, to I was in the White House a year and a half ago, in the Biden administration, they were totally sympathetic and they said, there's nothing I can do about it. This is outside of my charter. And so that's the reason is that the idea of stabilizing the climate made sense in 1980. We both have gray hair, so we probably remember 1980 slightly. And people didn't know, it has said scientifically we knew global warming was happening, but you couldn't see it. It was way below the noise level.
right.
And so I have total sympathy for all of our leaders who can't make a move. But your listeners, you guys and gals, sign up, even if it's $1 a month. Tell the leaders that there are serious people who want to restore the climate. Once they say we want to do it, then they have to figure out how. And once you figure out how and realize how easy it is, then it's almost a done deal. That's what I say.
Yeah. So we'll put the link in the show notes to the F4CR, the Foundation for Climate Restoration, where
.org.
you can go today and make a donation. And if many of us make a small donation, it will matter. So,
And if a few people put in a big donation, that also matters.
of course, it's a both and. We want small donations and big donations. I don't often ask for my listeners to take a step so concrete as this, but today I am asking that of my listeners. And if you would go to Foundation for Climate Restoration, that would be a wonderful thing. The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. So, Peter, I'm curious what else we have to educate people about, because I've had many conversations in the year and a half since I interviewed you the first time, and I would say only about 1 in 10 do I get a warm, fuzzy response to this whole concept of expanding OIF as a way to decarbonize the atmosphere. People have many questions and concerns, and as a biologist, I just get it, and the light bulb for me was immediate, and I'm on board. But for many people, they need more assurance. So how do we assure them that this is a legitimate thing?
Well, there are two ways. I'm going to harp again on the first thing is to decide you want it, because our brains confuse what we think with what we say, and what we say is what makes get us take action. So first, you have to ask people. We all want to restore the safe climate, don't we? And give them a second to think about it, and then without that, what happens is a good solution to the wrong problem is bad. And so even using ocean fertilization for stabilizing the climate at today's horrible levels is a bad solution. And so you're never going to win that. You'll never win their hearts because they'll just imagine the current context of stabilizing. So the first is to get people very clear. It's a new option, the option of restoring safe CO2 levels for our kids. Then the second is realizing that nature has done exactly this every 100,000 years for a long time. And so we know it's safe because it's been done dozens of times. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean the natural levels of CO2 in the atmosphere do fluctuate a lot over a very long time scale. And I'm curious, so from a scientific perspective, when levels historically get high, and we're in one of those periods now, when they get high, what is it about being in a high atmospheric level that then leads to some tipping point, some natural tipping point where iron can become more available to ocean dwellers?
Mm. So I think you're asking about the ice age cycle. Is what keeps it going? What keeps it stable? Is that what you're asking?
Well, the ice age cycle, I would see that as a result of levels, right?
Mm.
But yeah, I want to know how to talk to people about this, because there is an ice age cycle, there is a CO2 cycle, and they are they're
Yeah.
correlated.
Right. Right. So yeah. So here's how I describe it: is the first step is to realize that as far as the climate is concerned, it's really all about the CO2. When you read articles, you'll read about ice and methane and clouds and forest cover and methane, and you get all these long lists of things that affect temperature. If you look at the graph of global temperature versus CO2 over the last million years, the two of them track almost perfectly. Um, and the point is, if you don't reduce safe CO2, then it's game over. Everything else is a minor addition to that. And then once you're looking at how do we deal with CO2 and ask, well, what are the options? The sensible option is to do the same thing that nature has done to remove 1,000 gigatons. And there's nothing else that nature does that can remove 1,000 gigatons in the ice age cycle. It's interesting. Overall, it's like 50,000 years, but actually, it's more like 10,000 years. But it's still too long for us. We need to do it in 20 years. But that same process, if done in the right place, which is the downwelling eddies, then it can be done very quickly. And that's been demonstrated after volcanic eruptions that happen near these downwelling eddies.
And is that the most common theory, though, that there just are periodic events where there's more dust coming into the atmosphere and falling into the ocean, and that leads to decarbonization, which leads to cooling?
Yeah, as an astrophysicist by training, it's actually surprisingly complicated. And it's these subtle things because you have a positive feedback loop, which means that rather than being stable, when the Earth rotates in its orbit around it wobbles in its orbit around the sun, and that wobbling sometimes has the southern hemisphere be closest to the sun in the summer, and sometimes it's the northern hemisphere closest to the sun in the summer. And that little bit of difference, it's a 1% difference in distance, is enough to change the climate a little tiny bit, and it causes. I'm going to go complicated here for just a second, just so you can appreciate the complexity. You don't have to learn this, but it causes the grasses in the grasslands to dry out faster. When the grasses dry out, then you get dust storms, right? When the grasses are green, they don't dry out, but when they dry out faster, you get more dust, and that dust, then some of it blows into the ocean, fertilizes the ocean, causes CO2 to go down. And when the CO2 level goes down, that makes it harder for grass to grow because grass and all plants need CO2. And because it's harder for them to grow, they dry out faster because they expend more energy and more water to grow. And then you get even more dust blowing. So that's the
The positive
surprisingly
feedback loop, yeah.
complicated, a positive feedback loop. But it takes just a little nudge, that 1% difference in uh, uh, warming between the northern hemisphere with all the land, most of the land, and the southern hemisphere, which only has a little bit of land. Anyway, you should just appreciate how exotically beautiful that phenomenon is.
Yeah.
But because we have technology, it takes almost nothing for us to distribute that small amount of iron in the right places in the right time.
So the foundation is raising money, and the alliance is creating a program. And together, for example, they are creating pilot projects. So let's talk about some of those pilots. How does this unfold? What is the foundation going to achieve in the next couple of years if things go well?
Yeah. So the foundation is going to build up in the next year and a half, 2 years, the Million Sponsor campaign. It's been done before. Everyone wants it. I think it'll be a lot of fun and go quickly. And that's what the foundation is working on, is the grassroots movement. And that justifies leadership to say, let's do it. Then the alliance is raising the funds from corporations primarily, but also wealthy families. There will be certain governments. I think our U.S. government will be the last in line to fund this, but that's fine. The amount of money required is not large, and uh, but so corporations and wealthy families to fund it, and that funding should go pretty quickly. And then you were asking, what does it look like, in terms of the testing? And the testing starts out with getting the hardware working, our CO2 sensors and analysis of satellite CO2 data and chlorophyll data. We have a number of interesting scientific things that need to be done. We need to understand the best way to deal with the downwelling eddies, because they shift with the ocean currents, and nature deals with it. And we don't yet know exactly how we're going to replicate how nature does that, but we'll definitely solve that problem. And over time, we'll find the best formula for fertilizing it. Because again, it's a pretty small area, 100, 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers in diameter. And but it'll be mostly iron, but there are different forms of iron and so on. Nature is very forgiving, but we'll optimize that. And so then, as that's happening, and we're finding which of the eddies are the best places to do this, and the new satellite data is going to shine a light on that probably within 3 to 10 months. Then we're ready to scale up. And the fun part, Tim, is there's a company that we're working with, which is designing robotic ships to actually distribute the iron. Because the biggest cost of these things is the diesel and the people on board. You have to have cooks and a medic and a captain and all that stuff. If it's all robotic, the whole thing becomes very inexpensive.
I love it. And so let's just walk through the cycle. You take iron pellets, which is a commercial product. You put them on robotic ships. This is at some point in the future, but you put them on ships, tubs of this stuff. You drive to the identified spot where there's a downward eddy. This is just like a river that flows down, right? It's a natural phenomenon in the ocean. And you put the iron in the ocean. It's absorbed by phytoplankton, which absorbs CO2. They do photosynthesis. They absorb CO2. Some of them just die and sink. Some of them are eaten by other plankton, zooplankton, that eat phytoplankton, and then they die and sink. So the phytoplankton and zooplankton absorb CO2 and it sinks. Some of it obviously gets eaten by other things, so not all of it is sinking, but in a perfect world, it's sinking very deep and then staying down there for a very, very long time. Are there other parts of this cycle that we need to identify?
Yeah, well, what we've learned in the last year or two, as we've been studying what happened after the volcanoes, is uh, the conventional thinking is, and I've discussed it, and I now say it differently. The conventional thinking is that the dead phytoplankton, zooplankton fish sink. What we realize now is looking at the satellite data is that they get eaten before they sink, almost all of them.
Okay.
And so it's the downwelling eddy which pulls it down, and it pulls it down with the whole water mass that's going down. And here's one of the very cool things that we figured out just in the last couple of weeks is one of the concerns about large scale ocean fertilization. It's localized, but localized maybe 50 spots. Is people are worried about all that phytoplankton you're growing is going to affect the nutrition in the ocean. They call it nutritional robbing. And it turns out not to be a problem in this case because if you think of a cubic yard or cubic meter of ocean, the main nutrient that we're worried about, nitrogen, we actually regenerate by the same way you do it on farms with nitrogen fixing bacteria. But after that, the next nutrient that's a problem is phosphorus. And the concentration of phosphorus in the ocean is whatever it is in most parts of the ocean. But when the phytoplankton grow, they absorb the phosphorus. It gets, put it into their bodies. But because it's not so much sinking, but just sort of hovering there, when the downwelling eddy pulls it down, the net concentration per cubic meter is the same. And then as the biocarbon sinks into the ocean, when it gets deep enough, the whole thing dissolves because that's just what happens under the super high pressures. And then that phosphorus is released back into the ocean. And it's like nothing ever happened, except that you had that mechanism of the photosynthesis on the surface, and then the sinking, and then the carbon gets saved as bicarbonate, like bicarbonate of soda,
Hmm.
but it's a dissolved bicarbonate in the ocean. Uh, and the useful fact is the amount that the bicarbonate goes up, per year is about 0.04%. Is that right? Yeah, 0.04% per year, almost nothing per year. When we're all done, the amount of bicarbonate in the ocean will have gone up one, maybe 1.5%, almost nothing. And that's when it's pulled out all trillion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. So it's
But so
very
the CO2
benevolent.
ends up dissolved in the deep ocean?
The carbon does, because
Yeah.
the CO2 it dissolves, for a little bit in the surface, then it gets absorbed into the phytoplankton and turned into biocarbon. If when I think of a tree, I think of the wood and the leaves. I don't know what you call it in the phytoplankton because they're a single cell organism,
Yeah.
and then but it's biocarbon. And then when the biocarbon dissolves in the deep ocean, the solution is bicarbonate. So it's not because if we're carbon dioxide, then it would come right back out again and get back into the atmosphere because instead it's stored as bicarbonate.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not like this rain of skeletons of zooplankton that
Yeah,
stays in some solid form.
yeah, that's a new discovery. It hasn't been proven, but it makes logical sense
Hmm.
that there's some of the phytoplankton do have silicate shells, like not quartz, but micro quartz. Some of them have carbonate shells like limestone, and those will sink. But mostly they all get eaten by the zooplankton, and so they don't sink. And that's that, when people read about it in the internet, they'll read about how the scientists say, now, wait a minute, ocean fertilization doesn't work well because very little of the carbon goes down. And the answer is yes, you're exactly right. It only goes down in the downwelling eddies. And that we've written a study about it, but it hasn't gotten published yet.
Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much. All right. Well, what else should our listeners know about climate restoration in our last few minutes together, Peter?
Well, the main thing, as I said, is to share about it. It's a whole new paradigm for the climate. It's a whole new paradigm for the future of our planet, the future of our world that we're giving to our kids and our grandkids. It makes me very excited to know that my oldest grandkid is only 5 right now, but he, and his cousins, they're going to have a great planet to live on. Because the work that you're doing in solar is getting rid of the pollution from fossil fuels, and the air will be cleaner, the ground will be cleaner, the water will be cleaner, and we'll also make sure that the CO2, that the climate is good. So share about it, make the people in your family and your friends optimistic about the future, because we are going to do this, and we need them to help.
Agreed. So go to foundationforclimaterestoration.org. That's where you can make a donation. And Peter also has a website with a very interesting white paper, peterfikowski.com.
Yes. .com.
And we'll put those links in the show notes. I want to thank Peter Fikowski, author, entrepreneur, and champion for climate restoration, for coming on the show yet again. And with that, I'll say, let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague. Thanks so much, Peter.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, audience.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 3-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more.